And hello to anyone who's watching. My name is Henning Eklund. I am a League of Legends caster and analyst. I recently casted the Ragnarök-tournament, the Scandinavian tournament in League of Legends, and I thought, why let all the preparation and research go to waste? Why not jump into a pick and ban phase and go through it a lot more thoroughly than you're able to do on a normal cast? So that is what we're going to do right here. This is going to be the first, and I think if we got enough time, the second game of nDurance versus Rörmokarna from the semifinals of Ragnarök this year. And as you can see on the screen there, you'll have to try to ignore mine and Sang's beautiful faces as we're going through this. I have watched this game before, and so I know what the picks are going to be, but that doesn't stop me from being able to break down what is happening. So, what are we thinking? 6.21, 6.21. So it's before the new masters. It's no Courage of the Colossus, no Redemption, no Assassin Rework. A lot of focus going to be on towards the junglers. As we can see so far, we do have Rek'Sai banned out. The only thing, Rek'Sai is the jungler that kind of stands out here because it's a Chronos special. You see Chronos on Rörmokarna. He played Rek'Sai a really good Rek'Sai in the quarterfinals. Really popped off and got a lot of kills. Was able to gank with a very interesting padding there. So it's a ban that is targeted onto Chronos specifically, not because it's a generally strong pick in the meta, but because Chronos is very strong with the Rek'Sai. Other than that, just meta bans so far. And as we can see, a lot of jungle attention. There's Olaf, Rek'Sai, and Nidalee being banned out. And I'm going to pause when the bans are done, and we'll go through that a bit more. But this leaves Lee Sin and it leaves Elise open as the two big early game junglers. Now there are other okay junglers that are up. There's still the likes of a Hecarim, Zac, Graves, Evelyn. I don't know really. We've seen Trundle jungle in this tournament, but it's really the Elise and the Lee Sin that both of the teams are looking for right here. Since the two big power farming junglers, they're really strong, are off. That's Nidalee and that's Olaf. And since we've got the target ban on Chronos' Rek'Sai, we're looking for Elise and Lee Sin. And now we're going to pause the VODs because we see the VOD. Excuse me. Because we can see Elise coming in as the last ban from Rörmokarna. And this leaves Lee Sin open. And this leaves Lee Sin open as the only really strong pick in the situation. So we're seeing that Kadirch is going to get his hands on towards Lee Sin. That's the first pick. So I've talked a lot about the junglers. What are the other really strong champions that are open right here? There is Jhin in the AD carry. And Jhin is, I think we've said, the only real S-tier AD carry on this patch in this tournament. We've seen like Caitlyn, Ezreal, and Ashe being kind of just a bit in the tier below Jhin, but Jhin is super strong in lane, and I think that's what is the thought process here for Rörmokarna, that we're gonna get the Jhin, and we're probably gonna get the Jace as well. Jace is the other big like OP pick, I'd say, in the top lane right here, as we have Poppy being banned out. Poppy is probably as high a priority as Jace, and has a good matchup into Jace. So the Poppy banned out, Rörmokarna is looking for nDurance to pick away the Lee Sin, and they themselves to pick away Jace and Jhin. Why do I like this position for nDurance still? So let me go through this. The first thing that I like for nDurance here is that their AD carry is Vardags, as you can see here. He is a good AD carry. I know some people like to flame him. I'm not going to. I think he's a good AD carry, but he's good at playing a certain style, and that style is playing a passive laning phase, hug the tower, farm up, and then be very useful in teamfights. Does that sound like Jhin? No, it does not sound like Jhin. It doesn't sound like Caitlyn either. It sounds like Ezreal, sounds like maybe Ashe, maybe some other AD, like lower tier AD carries. So Vardags, like nDurance, wouldn't want to early pick Jhin even if they had the opportunity. The other big thing here is that jungle is, in the current meta, in 6.21 meta, is just such a powerful role. So what jungler you get, if like the difference between playing with a jungler with the early pressure like Lee Sin, like Lee's, like Rek'Sai, compared to a jungler without early pressure, as we're going to see in this game from Rörmokarna, is so big. It affects how all the laners can play. There are things that you can do with an aggressive jungler that you cannot do without an aggressive jungler. So the two main things that I like, so nDurance and Rörmokarna, I think they're both kind of happy with this setup. nDurance is going to get Lee Sin, Rörmokarna is going to get probably Jace Jhin. But I like this for nDurance a lot more. So let's unpause here. Syndra ban I shouldn't have to mention, pretty much a must ban when you don't have the ability to first pick it. Leaves still a lot of strong mid laners open. We do have the Ryze, the Cassiopeia, Victor, Orianna. So the mid lane right now isn't a role. Like, okay, let me explain this. The train of thought that was just coming into my head. That jungle has a small pool of really good champions. AD carry has a small pool of really good champions. Mid lane is not a role with just a few good champions. There's a lot of mid laners that are viable in and of this meta. So it's going to be perfectly fine. I've been talking through the bans here. Yeah, we're going to see the Lee Sin first pick. I'm just going to fast forward this a little bit. As we see, oh, that's too far, shit. So unprofessional. Okay, so there we have the Lee Sin getting locked in for nDurance. As I was talking about, the only strong jungler with early pressure up. And now we're going to see the Ryze and the Jace getting locked in for Rörmokarna. I don't know. How should I put this? Picking Ryze is good. Ryze is a good champion. But picking Ryze when there's so many good mid laners open that can kind of counter him out, I don't like. So there's Cassiopeia, Victor, and Orianna that you can pick for nDurance and just shut down Ryze's laning pretty much. Like, not going to be able to kill him over and over in lane if both players play properly, but it's not like Ryze is going to be putting down a ton of pressure early on against a ranged, safe laner with a good wave clear, as those three I just mentioned. So their trip is probably feeling pretty confident going up against the Ryze. There is also the Jace, which I do like on this patch. Very strong top laner pick, especially with Poppy already being banned out. The thing is that you're picking Jace against an early game aggressive jungle champion when you almost know for sure that you're not going to have an early game aggressive jungler on your side. And Jace's big strengths, what are they? Huge mid game damage, huge early game damage, and a lot of pressure in the laning phase. He doesn't scale great into late game. He has some team utility with the acceleration gate, but he doesn't contribute that much unless he's able to not necessarily snowball, but at least do well in the laning phase and put down pressure. And putting down pressure against an aggressive jungler, when you don't have an aggressive jungler yourself, that's going to be a bit of a tough position for Wiki. So not kind of both. I'm not sure if I like the Jace pick here. I guess it's fine, because there's nothing that Svenny can really pick to counter it out in lane. But this is just goes to show how good it is for nDurance to get the Lee Sin with all these other junglers getting banned out. A role that I haven't talked about so far in this pick ban is the support role, which is a role which has been seeing a lot of attention in this metagame in World Championship, specifically seeing Misfortune, Syra, Karma, Nami bans and picks all around, also the Alistar. A really strong one. Speaking of Nami, here we have Nami and Ezreal. Picking Nami Ezreal with every single bottom lane champion still open. That says something about Vardags and Quickset. It says that they are inside this meta. It says that they're not confident in the laning phase. It says that they believe in their team a lot to carry, because I believe we're gonna see the Jhin Karma going up against this, and Karma regarded by a lot of people, including me on this patch, as the best support. I think Syra's up there as well. I think Syra's really good in this patch, but that's only if you can just put down so much pressure in the early game laning phase and then rotate get the early tower damage, and then rotate after getting the turret. So that is something that if Vardex and Quickset would have gone something like Caitlyn Zyra here instead of the Ezreal Nami, I would have liked it more, I think, because I like that way of playing League of Legends, the proactive style, getting the lane pressure, getting tower damage, and then rotating after that, as opposed to pretty much giving up lane pressure. So here we see the Jhin and the Karma getting locked in, and this is kind of what we expect right here. This is a very strong duo lane. It both has the early damage. Karma probably the highest damage support after Zyra. Jhin maybe the highest damage AD carry in laning phase. Not counting Urgot Kappa. So I like these picks. For Rörmokarna, I think it's a it's a good bottom lane, but it's also a good bottom lane in combination with what they already have. Rörmokarna right now, they have a team comp that makes sense. And I think if there's one thing I have to say I like in League of Legends, it's having a team comp that makes sense. It's clear what you want to do. You have a Ryze. Ryze does very high damage. Is kind of tanky for being a mid lane mage. And pretty much doesn't have cooldowns. What Ryze's weaknesses are is that he has no mobility spell if you don't count his ultimate, which is really hard to make work. And that he can get shut down in laning phase. That's probably the two big weaknesses, I'd say. Picking Jace in the top lane and picking Karma and Jhin in the bottom lane makes up for both those weaknesses in a very good way, in my opinion. They make up for Ryze's lack of mobility. It should be a bit obvious. Both Acceleration Gate and Karma Shield being able to speed up the Ryze. But also Jhin having very long range, locked down with both W and the ultimate. Is gonna help Ryze to gap close. Helping out Ryze's weakness to getting pushed down in lane might be a bit more of an abstract thing right here. But picking a high pressure top lane, and you know for sure, both teams know at this point in the laning phase, or pretty much from first rotation, that this is going to be a high pressure top lane for Rörmokarna because they have the Jace and there is not going to be a Poppy to counterpick with. So Jace is going to be putting down pressure in top. Attention from other lanes are likely to go to top lane as well, depending on what Svenny picks. Same goes for the bottom lane right here. There's the tower hugging lane pretty much for Vardex and Quickset here with the Nami Ezreal versus Titan Magne with Jhin Karma. They're going to be having a lot of pressure early on in the lane. And having a pushing top lane and a pushing bottom lane with pressure means that Kadiocha is going to be so busy trying to help out top, trying to help out bottom, trying to get vision for the lanes to prevent dives, that Legion's Ryze in the mid lane is not going to get targeted that heavily from Kadiocha, depending on the matchup we see in mid lane, of course. So as we unwind here, I kind of know what picks they're gonna go for here. But for nDurance so far, we've got a lot of disengage actually. People think about Lee Sin as an engaged champion with an insect plays. Sure, he can do that, but I like to think of Lee Sin as a versatile champion in that he can engage and he can also disengage. I think his disengage is actually really good. His peel both with the kick, the slow, the shield, everything. He does have a lot of utility for that. Nami, one of the strongest peeling supports. Also contributing a lot of damage to her AD carry with the Tight Collar's Blessing. And we have Ezreal, who has a lot of mobility and a lot of poke from like 2 items, and once he gets his 3rd item, he's going to have a lot of damage with the auto attacks as well. So far we have 2 champions with good disengage and 1 heavy damage champion from nDurance. So what I'd like them to do in this draft, and what I know that they're going to do, is pick heavy damage in the mid lane and some sort of peel in the top lane. They also have to pick up some extra wave clear right here because they don't have a lot of wave clear right now, and they're also going to do that in this rotation of the draft, as there's not, sadly, going to be the Tryndamere. So with this, they are also going to pick up a team comp that kind of makes sense, and that is something that as I said, I like that for both teams. And what's so interesting about this draft as well is that I think that these are two pretty good drafts. Or they're going to be two pretty good drafts. They also want to. Their team comps that want to play the game completely different. As I said so far, nDurance, high damage, especially in the late game, really wants to peel. Has the Nami, has the Lee Sin, and they're going to have the Maokai for peel. Has the Victor for a lot of wave clear, so it's able to buy time. The weird thing is, though, that they do have the early game proactive jungler in the Lee Sin. Lee Sin is going to have a bottom lane that's going to get pushed in. He's going to have a top lane that's going to get pushed in. He has a mid lane that's probably going to be fine. Probably going to be having the push advantage, at least from after first buy in mid lane. So Karichu is going to have a lot of things he wants to do on this Lee Sin. And now Rörmokarna has to answer the most interesting question in this draft. With 4 junglers banned out, Rek'Sai, Olaf, Nidalee, Elise, and the last high-tier jungler, Lee Sin, getting picked away, what do you go for? I talked earlier about the likes of Hecarim and the Graves that could be used as farming junglers. There is the potential for, if you really want to be cheeky, you could go for something like a Sack for the early pressure. You could go for Evelyn if you really feel confident with it. Kind of makes sense with this team comp. I think Hecarim makes a lot of sense with the speed ups. As a farming jungler though. But they pick another champion that really likes to get sped up, and that's a Skarner. So with the rosters right here locked in, we're just gonna take, I can let the video run so it doesn't like gray out. We can take a quick summary of how this pick ban went, who won and why. So pretty much gone through what both team comps want to do. There's a lot of catch potential and speed buffs on Rörmokarna. There's a lot of damage, but primarily mid and late game damage on nDurance, and there's very good peeling. So thinking about this in the early game stage, there's going to be pressure in the top lane from Wiki, in the bottom lane from Titan Magne. So Kadirche is the early game proactive jungler. Has to probably put attention towards at least one of those 2 lanes. Which means Death Rip and Legions are going to be able to farm it out in mid. Cronus is going to want to farm 6 and then make plays together with one of the mobility tools that they have, which is either Jace Gate, Karma Shield, or Rise Ulti. So picking the Skarner here is really weird, but it's what Cronus goes for. And these are 2 team comps that make sense, which I really like. And I'm now going to speed forward, I think, to the pick ban for game number 2, because I think it's a very interesting transition from this, because in game number 1, we have 2 team comps that I like. In theory, I think Rörmokarna has the more proactive team comp. So if Kronos doesn't fall behind to Kadirche, they're going to be able to be the ones making the plays. I kind of like it. nDurance, spoilers, is going to end up winning this game. The Thrup and Varug's just going to get a lot of items, sit in the back line and be pretty much unkillable, because they have Maokai, Nami, and Lee Sin Peel. But still, 2 team comps that make sense, 2 drafts that are pretty well executed, in my opinion. Now we're going to go over to game number 2. And as you might have guessed, we're not going to be seeing 2 team comps that makes a lot of sense. We're going to be seeing a bit of a weird drafts and teams forgetting about pretty much what you need in a draft. I'm just going to grab some water real quick. So what I mean by what you need in a draft? Well, except from the obvious, that's like you need a top laner, mid laner, etc. There are also a lot of things that you want on a team comp. And one of those things that are on the highest priorities right there is wave clear. And nDurance is going to draft a comp without wave clear. which makes it very interesting, to say the least, for you to be able to defend against a potential siege. So if you ever fall behind, your towers are going to be falling like there's no tomorrow. I'm just going to let the bans run through, and then we'll pause and talk about the adaptations from Game 1, because so far we see that nDurance right now does not have the first pick, so they are, in theory, going to have to ban the Syndra here to not let Legions have it. Meanwhile, we see Rörmokarna not happy with what they drafted in last game. They're banning out 2 of their own champions. In fact, the 2 champions that they picked in the first rotation, Ryze and Jace. 3 junglers getting banned out so far, and there's a Trundle. Okay, so here we're gonna pause, because in this pick ban, I think I remember me praising nDurance for the Trundle ban, thinking that this is really smart, because the 3 really strong top laners. I'm not gonna say the 3 really strong top laners, because there's also like Ken and Rumble and stuff, but Puppey, Jace, and Trundle work very interestingly with each other. And the fact that Puppey kind of counters Jace, Jace kind of counters Trundle, and Trundle counters Puppey. So with both Trundle and Jace getting banned out, Puppey's open. But Henning, why wouldn't Rörmokarna just first pick the Puppey here? Because you see what nDurance is doing, Syndra's open. So Rörmokarna has to choose between picking the Syndra and picking the Puppey. Also, Jhin is open, so Rörmokarna also has to take that into consideration. A lot of really OP picks are open right here. And we're going to see what Wiki picks up for his team right here. I do think that there's not really any reason for Rörmokarna to first pick Jhin right here, because nDurance has Vardog's, his style doesn't really fit with Jhin. So I think the real consideration here is whether you want to go for the Syndra or whether you're going to want to go for the Puppey. Pick the OP mid laner or the OP top laner. As I mentioned, there are still strong top laners open. There is Kennen, there is Echo, there is Gnar, there is Rumble. But Puppey is just on a higher level than all of those. So we're going to see Puppey fall over to nDurance, while Rörmokarna take Syndra. Syndra getting locked in means Legions is going to have pressure in his lane pretty much no matter what from level 6 and onwards. There are champions that can out-pressure Syndra before level 6. Cassiopeia is one of them, which you kind of like. Orianna can go toe-to-toe with her early in lane. But post level 6, it's pretty much not going to be... There's pretty much not going to be any champion that can have more pressure than Syndra in the 1 versus 1 in mid, so... Both teams know this, of course, that Legions is going to have pressure in mid lane. So what I think Kadirchi does here is really cool. He picks up the Elise over the Lee Sin. Elise and Lee Sin are the 2 strong junglers that are open right here. Kadirchi goes for the Elise. Means that he wants to put down more early game pressure and cares less about the late game potential. A lot of people, this might sound weird to a lot of people, because Lee Sin is not a champion that you think of as a strong late game champion, but if you compare Elise and Lee Sin, Elise is going to be the one with the more better level 3 gank, better ganks before 6. Lee Sin's going to have better ganks with ultimate, probably, depending on the angles and stuff. Also has to mention that we have to mention that Elise can dodge a Syndra ulti with the repel. So I'm just gonna wait for lock-ins here. Yeah. So with that, I think I like the Kadirchi goes with the Elise over the Lee Sin. This is weird though from Rörmokarna, because I mentioned Jhin as a very strong pick. I also mentioned that there are a lot of strong supports in the current meta. So there is Syra, Karma, Nami, Alistar. And now you go for 2 champions that you pretty much for certain know that you're going to be able to pick no matter what. nDurance is not going to be taking Kennen or Lee Sin away right here, because they already have the top and the jungler. So I don't like this from Rörmokarna. I would have liked at least a Jhin in this rotation, probably Jhin, Lee Sin, to not give away as much from your team comp. Goes for the Kennen though, which is a strong top laner. I like Kennen. I think it's a good champion. Kind of has a decent matchup into the Puppey as well. should actually have a lot of pressure early on in that lane, with a jungler that can almost match the pressure of Elise early on in the Lee Sin. But the thing is, you don't have to pick these away now. You can pick something like Karma Jin here again for a strong laning phase. Now we're going to be seeing Endurance. Might want to... There's an interesting choice in the mid lane with what you go for against the Syndra. What we've been seeing a lot in Worlds and stuff is the Vladimir. Can just get Spectre's Cull first back, rush for Boots 2 and Spirit Visage, then get kind of an early Sonias, and there's going to be a little potential for Syndra to do anything. And Vladimir is the champion that Death Rip is going to go for here. Now these two lock-ins in a row, I'm not a big fan of this. Actually, I think this is kind of terrible. Because there is the Vladimir and the Ezreal getting locked in. And as I said, Vladimir is... I was going to finish my train of thought with the Syndra matchup. Yeah, so Vladimir is the safe pick. Cassiopeia is the pick that you can go for if you're a bit more ballsy. People are going to make fun of this because we saw obviously Jensen getting clapped by Faker in that matchup in Worlds and everything. But you have more pressure early on than Syndra, like pre-6. You can turn jungle ganks pretty easy. And if you play Exhaust, you can Exhaust before the Syndra ultimate goes down. And thus you're gonna pretty much be fine as long as you have Exhaust available in the 1 versus 1s. So Cassiopeia is the pick if you want to go for the pressure, Vladimir if you don't. Death Rip picks the Vladimir, so that's okay on its own. No pressure early on for Vladimir in the mid lane. Vodex though goes on towards the Ezreal. Also not a lot of pressure early on in the lane. And we know this is Vardex's style. It's what he likes to play. It's what he's the best at in my opinion. But picking these two in combination with a Poppy and Kennen matchup where Kennen has the early pressure means that you have 3 lanes. And I'm going to show you with my fingers because I think this is such an important point. You have 3 lanes that are going to get out-pressured pretty much from the early mid-game. Like mid-late, Poppy's going to out-pressure Kennen in the 1v1. And Israel might do the same. But before this is Kadirche. Kadirche is going to have a really tough time to set up the plays. And I mentioned the comparison between Lee Sin and Elise, with Elise being the pick if you want more early pressure and less late game. Here Kadirche has a lot of early pressure on the Elise, but he has 3 lanes that are going to get out-pressured. So he's going to have a really tough time on this Elise to make something happen. Also, there's another point, and I'm going to get to this point before Magda locks in the Braum, because the Braum is fucking brilliant. Okay, I shouldn't have sweared. I'm going to cut that out. Magda picking the Braum here is really brilliant. Why is Braum a brilliant pick? Braum does one thing really well, and that is to deny opponents. So opponents with a certain skilled shot, a certain spell that's really good, can get blocked out by the Braum. That's why it's so good against Nidalee to block the spears, etc. Braum also blocks out wave clear. If you have an Ahri, if you have a Victor, if you have an Orianna or something, Braum is just going to put up a shield and make that wave clear pretty much non-impactful. I talked about the importance of drafting wave clear earlier on in the comp. It's the only thing I talked about during this game because I think it's such a huge deal. Look at Endurance right now. What do we have for wave clear? Poppy, no wave clear unless you want to go in melee, which doesn't count. Volatile Spiraling from Kadirche. Death Rip kind of has his E, I guess. Vortex has his ultimate. Kind of has his Q once, his Iceborne Gauntlet. So there's pretty much no wave clear from Endurance. Cassiopeia instead of Vladimir would not have only have given them a lane that has pressure early on, but also a lane with wave clear, which is going to be super important in this game, as you're going to see in this game. Braum, what he does here is he makes the problem of lacking wave clear even worse, because he's able to deny the True Shot Barrage, the Volatile Spiraling. So it's going to be super hard. It's already super hard for Endurance to wave clear, but it's going to be even harder with the Braum getting locked in. So I didn't criticize the teams a lot in the first draft because I think it was pretty good from both teams. Here I think both of the teams make kind of weird decisions with the especially the Lee Sin Kennen rotation. But I think Rörmokarna's draft is kind of fine. I mean, they got the Syndra, the Braum pick is brilliant. But nDurance's draft here is, I'm not going to call it shit, but it's very terrible. Sure, you do have some individual strong picks, but as a team, makes very little sense. Lacks wave clear, lacks lanes with pressure. I would have loved a Cassiopeia instead of a Vladimir if Deathloop feels confident in this matchup. And here we have the Jhin alongside with the Braum. What have we talked about the Jhin? He's a very strong AD carry in the current meta, and he's a very strong AD carry because his pick potential and because he wins lanes. Especially when going up against an Ezreal. On the other hand, Braum is not the strongest of laners. He's going to be okay in certain matchups, but against a strong range supports, against like a Karma, a Syra, a Nami, Braum is going to lose lane. Which is why he isn't picked much. Here is picked to deny the wave clear. Why, then, could you ask, is it okay for Magnet to pick Braum when the importance of lane pressure, especially in the bottom lane, is so big in this metagame? Because you're up against Vardex and Quickseth, who are not strong in lane, and Vardex has already went on towards the Ezreal. So now Magne can pick the Braum, can pick a lane that is weaker than if he would have picked something like a Karma, for example, but does a lot better in the mid game when it comes to sieging. It denies the wave clear, and it augments the problem that nDurance already has in this draft. So I really like the Braum pick here, and I think it's a big mess up for nDurance to allow this to happen. So we're going to see the last pick for nDurance right here. They pretty much have to pick some sort of wave clear here to salvage the what is going on. Other than that, their comp doesn't make that much sense. Like, they have some pick potential. They have, I guess, CC set up in top lane to make a pick happen. But it's just, you're getting out pressured in 3 lanes and you're drafting a wave clear. Pretty much 2 of the biggest things that you have to make sure you're doing in a draft. These 2 things, especially in combination, makes it even worse. Because the lack of wave clear actually, if you're just stomping all 3 lanes and have jungle pressure, you can invade, you can go for objectives like Rift Herald and Dragon. You lacking wave clear doesn't really matter. You lacking wave clear matters if the enemy team is allowed to group up and siege. What gives you the ability to group up and siege? Winning your lanes and making the rotations. So winning lanes transition very well into abusing lack of wave clear. Karma is getting picked up here as the last pick for Quickseth, which is, it's like trying to salvage the situation. We have a pretty strong laner, and we have a bit of wave clear, but you can't count on your wave clear coming from the support position. So I wanted to highlight these 2 pick and ban phases because I think the first one was a good draft phase from both teams. This time, Rörmokarna kind of made a weird rotation with the Lee Sin Cannon, but other than that, I liked the draft. And nDurance just messed up. So what can we learn from this? Well, I've said it a lot of times. I'm going to say it again. Draft wave clear. If you're not drafting wave clear, draft winning lanes. Now, none of this happened. With Cassiopeia in mid instead of Vladimir, that is the big switch up I would do. I also would have liked a bottom lane with more pressure. Something like a Caitlyn Zyra could punish the Braum pick, because right now Braum is going to be able to get through for free, pretty much. He's going to be able to get out of the laning phase and then contribute with the utility that he has without getting punished for it. But Vardex and Quickseth not being able to play the style of aggressive laning phase with something like a Caitlyn Zyra really comes back to bite nDurance right here. So they're going to go on to lose this game and lose the series. Now, if you enjoyed this pick and ban run through that I did, I guess go follow me on Twitter or something. I don't know, I'm called Henning Lal over there. Give me some suggestions for other things you'd like me to make. I am kind of starting up with this YouTube thing, but I enjoy it so far, and as I said in the intro, when you have a lot of research and prep done, why let it go to waste? You can use it to make this kind of stuff. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.